guess so.
The Jersey Shore School Board of Directors meeting for February the 14th is now called to order. There was an executive session starting at 5:45 previous to this meeting. A comment to the board, please remember to turn on your mics. There is trouble with people on the live stream hearing what it is you're saying. Roll call, Mr. Enders.
Mr. Allen.
Present.
Mrs. Calhoun.
Here.
Ms. Dobler.
Here.
Mrs. Edwards.
Here.
Mrs. Grant.
Here.
Mr. Kinley. Mrs. Petrosky.
Here.
Mrs. Stemler. Mrs. Thomas.
Here.
All 9 members present.
All right, then Pledge of Allegiance.
I'm going to recognize Mrs. Johnston, who's going to introduce our 2 students for this evening.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Haley and Cole, if you could come up here, please. I have something for you.
Thank you for that.
Yes, thank you.
Over here, hon.
Thank you. Thank you, parents.
Next on the agenda, we have presentations. First one is communications. Dr. Ulmer.
I have nothing for communications.
Second is president report, nothing to add on president's report. Third is intermediate unit report. Jesse, do you have anything for us at this time?
No, I don't.
Nothing tonight. And fourth is the student rep report.
No, I don't.
Fifth under presentations is the superintendent's report.
I want to start this evening by recognizing our January Employee of the Month. Mr. Ryan Marshall is our head custodian at Saladiesburg Elementary, and Mr. Wall and I went out and visited him this morning and recognized him as Employee of the Month. His staff, I think there were 3 or 4 people on the staff at Saladiesburg Elementary who sent us notes about him. And he, if you remember, is a fairly new head custodian. We moved him to that position back in the fall, and the staff all got together and just raved about him and when they nominated him. So thanks to Ryan Marshall for all the hard work he's doing at Saladiesburg Elementary. And I'm going to start the formal budget presentation process this month with Mrs. Johnston and Mr. Jean to review their budgets. You'll notice that in front of you at your seat, you have, and these were in the budget folder online. Remember that Mr. Enders and I created that shared folder that we're dropping budgets into so you will already have. Next month, you're going to see Mr. McCormick and Mr. Veldus, and a week before their presentation, you'll get this full breakdown report prior to them reviewing it at the meeting. So we did print those for you at your seat, but those are also available in the online folder. And then Mr. Jean and Mrs. Johnson are going to review for you some of the highlights and changes that have happened in their budget since last year at this time.
Did you tell them the PowerPoint was also?
Oh, sorry. The PowerPoint's there as well. So if you want to follow along with what they have on the screen, it's also printed. Thank you, Mr. Enders.
Good evening, board. I will start with the 22-23 budget for Jersey Shore Area Elementary School. Some of our action plan goals that are going to be carrying over into the 2022-23 school year are to continue to provide ELA professional development for our staff. ELA, for anybody who's not familiar, stands for English Language Arts. So that's our reading, writing, spelling, everything included there. Continue math curriculum development process, which is going on K-12 right now, and also continue using data analysis to inform decision-making and instructional growth. So all those things are supported by our budget this year. The major changes, they're really not major, but any changes that you might notice in the JSE budget, the increase this year is in the budget for math books. Last year, I did not budget enough for math books. I remember we discussed that a year ago at our presentation. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that a lot of students returned at the beginning of this school year from online programs, and our numbers didn't quite catch up to the ordering process. So I increased our budget in that area. Those are consumable math books. Also, our elementary nurse, purchased an audiometer, and that's cost you will see split between the 3 elementary school budgets, JSE, Saladysburg, and Avis. So you'll see that in all 3 of the budgets. And also, the last 2 years, we had budgeted a significant amount to purchase new music curriculum items. And so that purchase was over 2 years, and it's now complete. So you'll see a decrease in that line item. And also science supplies, we had been purchasing over, I believe, the last 5 years to build up our entire science program, K-5, and that purchase is also complete. So you'll see a decrease from last year in that area as well. And those items I just mentioned, I just included some of the numbers so that you could see what exactly the increases and decreases were for each of those line items.
Adrian, can I interject here real quick? So, for the board, for your reference, the math books are on the bottom of the sheet. It says page 3. The budget right now sits at $19,000. As Adrian's pointing out to you up there, we're going to reduce that down to $17,250. We made that change mid last week through reviewing her budget and preparing for his presentation, but we did not want to change it, reprint it, and hand it to you again. So I just want to let you know that number is not reflective in your documents. It will be reflective in the budget after this meeting. But that number will decrease from $19,000 down to $17,250, which is also referencing what Adrian was talking about earlier concerning math books.
So the overall budget will also obviously come down by $2,000 because of that decrease. The conclusion, there wasn't a whole lot of change. The slight increases in some areas were offset by decreases in other, basically because of updating curriculum in certain areas each year and then others in other years. So there's very little change in the overall building budget from this year to next year. Did you have any questions, or would you like to hear from Mr. Jean and then ask questions of both of us?
What is the audiometer? Is that oxygen or what is that?
That is what they use for hearing tests, correct?
Oh, is it? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
they do hearing screenings with all the elementary students, and so they just needed to upgrade their equipment.
Okay.
I believe she told me the current one's over 15 years old.
Wow. Well, that's good. They last a long time.
One of the things you'll probably hear from every principal going through this process, something that we've seen last year where in a budget to actual comparison is our not spending of field trip money. And particularly if you look at JSC's budget, there's about $1,600 of field trip money that was not spent in 2021 that's being budgeted for this year and being budgeted for next year. We are budgeting as if we were going back to normal, whatever normal looks like.
Want to go back to normal?
We are, my understanding is there are field trips planned for this spring, so they will be happening this year.
What usually comes out of that field trip line item is a trip to the Community Arts Center for their educational series. We didn't do that the past 2 years. We are planning to do that in April and May this year. So that item or that amount that has not yet been spent should be spent this spring from the 21-22 budget.
One other thing that we'll be keeping a very close eye on to see if this is a new normal or if it's something that's just a trend, is we're not seeing our professional development money spent because so many of them are virtual now. So we are seeing a large variance in that area. It will be something that we'll keep a close eye on going through the rest of this year and then going into next year as well, and kind of seeing if this is a new trend or if this is just the new normal, I guess.
I also wanted to add, I said in the beginning of the presentation that we have been providing some pretty comprehensive ELA professional development, and we were fortunate enough to get 2 grants this year to provide professional development for ELA, both in the primary and intermediate grades. So that's another reason that those costs were offset, because we were fortunate to get that funding.
I have a question on, to follow up what Ben just said, as far as the professional development travel. Do we encourage or at least suggest that professional development presentations or conferences, if virtual is available, that we try to get people to go that route as opposed to actually physically going to the conference?
I would say yes. And what we have seen in the last 18 months is most of them have been virtual. I think we have, like, Mrs. Johnson and I had this conversation recently. All the required federal programs trainings have all been virtual until I think it's in the spring. There's one coming up in the spring that they're saying is going to be in person at this point, and Mrs. Johnson is going to attend and is registered for in person. But we've seen that over and over. They schedule trainings, they schedule PD, and then at the last minute it becomes virtual, and we either get reimbursed or we don't get charged. But yes, we encourage that if there's 2 options.
Okay, good, thank you.
I think it really depends on what's offered. Not all of them are offered.
Are there any other questions?
This isn't necessarily for you, it's kind of for Ben. So looking at these numbers, and I'll just use the professional development as an example. On here you have the actual, and then you have the 2,000 budgeted across the last 3 years. And then you have the variance. So this variance of 1,328, was that recognized in the last year's budget as a savings? You understand what I'm saying?
But I think you're referencing the first column of the variance. Should be the $9,383 grand total. Oh, the 1328 is what you're referencing for?
Yes.
Yeah, I looked at grand total.
Sorry.
Yes.
But so that has been recognized in the budget savings from that year, is that correct?
It would not, I wouldn't call it a savings, I would call it a budget variance, budget actual variance. So it means that your actual was less than budget by $1,328.
Okay,
Other
Mr.
questions?
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Jean. While he's walking to the podium, notice there are two packets, one for Avis and one for Sal. And I neglected to mention before Mrs. Johnson started that the PowerPoints for each one are attached to the back of them. So I'm sorry, I didn't say that the last time, but if Mr. Jean is starting with Avis, so make sure you're looking at the Avis PowerPoint.
Good evening, board. We'll start with Avis. And obviously they're very similar to JSC's. Obviously we're doing the various, I think we've done a great job over the last couple years of trying to be as consistent across the board of all the elementary schools and making sure we're seeing consistent curriculum and all that stuff. So again, if a child does move from school to school, that they are at that particular spot where they left off from Avis, Sal to JSC or whatever. So I think Ms. Johnson and Mrs. Probst and myself, we've worked very closely to keep that cohesiveness. So again, too, it's greatly appreciated to work with Mrs. Johnson and Mrs. Probst. So we continue to build capacity in our teachers with interpreting data. Again, too, this year, we introduced iReady, which is another great piece for data collecting and helping us personalize instruction when we grab that data from students when we benchmark them, along with Acadience, which is a universal screener and so forth, and Dibble's reading too with the universal screener. So this just gives an opportunity to really target those skill deficits for our kids in order to close the gap with those kids. So I think it's very valuable, the piece, and also to continue the capacity with our teachers. We continue to develop our curriculum with the math, and we're meeting that with departments and so forth, and with elementary, middle school, high school, and trying to develop that K through 12, which is a great piece. And then, of course, then again, too, like Ms. Johnson said about the ECRI and the 5th grade writing grant, I think those two pieces are so critical, and we see the growth. And I know we had the grant 2 years ago with Avis, and we have used and used that piece with growing capacity within our teachers with ECRI through the IU, and having a consultant come in and working and pushing in and showing them and teaching, coaching them and so forth. And I know that JSE was able to secure it this year, and I think they're going to see tremendous growth within their kids as well. And it's so valuable, and our teachers have just taken it and just run with it. So that's where the capacity is. And then, of course, our 5th grade writing grant is going great this year. So we're working very closely with Patan and their consultants too. So again, our 5th grade writing grant team is tremendous. And again, too, those are individuals that have been selected in JSE, Salisbury, and Avis, and what a team we have. So that's where we are with our building action plan for this year, or this coming year. And again, I don't know if they're major, but again, I mean, obviously, there are a couple $100 here and there and so forth, but, I know it's a couple $100 and it adds up, but still, I understand. The decrease in music supplies, as Ms. Johnson said, obviously, the last 2 years, we've purchased K2 and then 3-5 program forms, so that's done. And then, of course, the decrease in science supplies, that is when we had to fill all the things with FOSS. And then now we're just supplementing or buying materials that we've already used now through the process of the last couple of years. And so we saw a decrease in that, and the only increase is the odometer with printer this year. Okay, and that's shared amongst all the elementary schools, and it travels, okay? And you can see up there, there's the monies that were budgeted for. There's a decrease in music from 16 to 900, FOSS from 633 to 317, and obviously last year's budget and everything for the odometer. So now, of course, we've taken on, the $436 to purchase the new odometer and printer. Okay. And as Ms. Johnson said, you know, there was increases in certain areas and obviously offset by decreases, which really, when you look at SAU, I have right now in front of me, or I should say not SAU, Avis, the 21-22 budget was, you know, $23.99, and then this year's budget is an increase of like $150 maybe to $25.46. So that is Avis. And again, as I said too, you know, you see the monies for the CAC coming up here in the spring with our trips. We'll be using that money as well. So is there any questions with the Avis budget at all?
Just for clarity, Board, in this audio reader, there's one per the elementary schools. That's why you see the same dollar amount for all three buildings. And there's one for the secondary schools. So when we go to the secondary level, you'll see the split. It's about $1,300 piece of equipment. You'll see it split to about $600 per those two buildings. Okay. So then once you think we're buying 5 of them at $435, we're buying 2, one for elementary level and one for the secondary level. Go ahead, Don.
Any questions for Avis? Okay. Salisbury. Same thing is across the board with all 3 elementary schools. Again, too, I think the most important thing is obviously we give those teachers knowledge in order to take it into the instruction piece and be able to help our students grow and be successful students in the elementary and then move them to middle school. So again, too, the capacity piece is absolutely huge and interpreting data as well. The math curriculum, as I spoke to with Avis and JSE, and of course, then obviously with ECRI and our 5th grade writing grants. And again, too, even though we've had, and I will say this, even though we've had the ECRI in 2 years with Avis and Salisbury, I will tell you that we still have Amanda Karafik still come in from the IU and still give us booster shots when we need to, or teachers ask us for those. And they're important just to make sure we're doing that with fidelity. That's huge. Okay. So again, that is the action plan here. Again, just report here with the decrease in music supplies, same thing. A decrease in science supplies, and of course, again, the increase in purchase of the odometer with the printer. And you can see there's the difference there, almost very similar to Avis with the 1617,949 decrease FOSS, and then the increase with the odometer. And again, in conclusion, you know, you have increases, you have decreases, which offset each other. And again, when you look at SAU, this year's budget 21-22 from last year's 24-38, and then this year is 21-51. Obviously, that's a decrease of about maybe $280 some. Okay. And again, same thing, field trips, we'll be taking those field trips to CAC and so forth, okay? Is there any questions with Salisbury?
So, I mean, this actually is all of you. The FOSS kits, we have all the FOSS kits now, so now
Yeah.
we're just replacing consumable supplies that are in the kit.
That's correct. And it varies. That's why you see the decrease.
I have just a brief question. What does ECRI stand for?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mrs. Johnson. I should have put that next to the parenthesis of ECRI. That's my fault. That's okay.
And I want to add to that, that's the grant that you accepted at the last meeting, that's something that we are getting through that Patan grant. I also want to recognize, Mr. Jean said it, but part of that, the grant requirement is part of that funding goes to the IU for supporting that grant. So when you heard him say that person comes in, there is a person dedicated from the IU to that grant who comes here and not only sits through all the training, but then comes back and supports our teachers as they implement that program. So that's key in making sure that anytime a teacher says, hey, I'm not sure if I'm doing this right, I need help,
Yes.
we can call them and they'll be right here giving that additional support. So that's key in the partnership that we have with the IU. The other thing I want to say as I sat here and listened to both presentations is how refreshing it is that the two of them work so well together. It's nice to see that consistency across all of the buildings and that what they're doing is the same and what the programs are implementing are the same. And it's more than just, Mr. Jean said it, if a kid moves from one building to the other, but then they're all going to the same place. So you're not creating a situation where you get a group of sixth graders and some of them know one way and some of them know the other way. They're all seeing the same programs and experiencing the same curriculum. So thanks to the both of you.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's my report for this evening.
Moving on to courtesy of the floor. We have one person signed up, Mr. Schweitzer. The agenda items is transfer. Please state your name, address, and the agenda item. And you will have 3 minutes.
Good evening, board. Can you hear me?
Yep. Absolutely.
What am I supposed to give? My name, rank, and serial
Number, yes. That would be fun.
325 Job's Run Road, Jersey Shore, PA. A comment on just what I observed. I feel that we squeeze our principals' budgets too much. That's just the impression I have. The second point regarding the budget review, I'm very interested in learning how to read. You didn't mention anything about that, but I assume that you're getting all your training aids or whatever you need in order to do a good job on teaching the children how to read. And the other comment regarding this presentation, I think you should include the salaries and benefits of the staff in the principal's budget. I don't know why we don't do that, but it's just a thought. And the last point, I have a question regarding an agenda item where you're transferring $250,000, I think, out of the unassigned fund balance into the capital projects budget. Why are you doing that?
I can answer that. That was actually discussed at the capital projects meeting as a recommendation from the committee. That would be funds that we put into fund balance from last year's audit that we want to put in capital projects so that we can handle some of the capital projects items that we know are coming up needing to be taken care of.
How much money is in the capital projects budget right now?
Right now, it's about 800,000. So this would put us at $1 million.
800,000. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, moving on to category D, personnel. Personnel items that we have a couple retirements. We are accepting a letter of retirement from Nancy Rodaball, who's a learning support teacher. And we're accepting a letter of retirement for Christopher Eck, who's a paraprofessional at Derbyshire Elementary. We have some resignations. We have some coach and game staff appointments. And we have some volunteer appointments. May I have a motion?
I'll second.
Questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those in favor, nay. The ayes have it. Letter E is curriculum and instruction, and you have to approve the high school course catalog. And one of the things, if you had time to listen, this is also goes on the webpage when it's official, and you can see other ones, is that we offer to our students a wide variety of options. It's not a cookie cutter piece. When they get to the high school, they have choices to deal with where they're going into their careers or what they're doing next. And we have a number of CTE classes that continue to grow in that aspect. I could use a motion.
Motion.
Second.
Anyone have questions on the course catalog?
I have a question. I just wanted to know if Dr. Ulmer, if you know from last year's catalog, if there's been anything newly added or anything subtracted. It's pretty lengthy. And I wasn't going to go through it item by item, which I've done in the past with my kids, but I was wondering if you knew specifically.
I honestly don't think so, because you have to approve as a board new courses. So I think it's pretty much in line with what you would have seen last year.
Okay, thank you.
The Lackawanna courses, is it the second year for them or the first? We approved them. I remember approving them, but are they even processed this year?
They are in process this year. They started pretty heavily in the 1920 school year. I don't know if they were at Jersey Shore yet in 1920, but that college was doing a lot of work in the 1920 school year. So if it's not the third year, it's at least the second.
Any other questions? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those not in favor, nay. Motion carried. Next is building and grounds, of which there is no action tonight. Next, letter G, we have finances, which Mr. Schweitzer talked about, transferring $250,000 from the unassigned fund balance to capital projects. Part of this amount came about from after our audit was completed and reviewed and given us the formal details. And there's an elevator quote of $26,622.20 for the elevator at Derbyshire Elementary to be paid with capital project funds. And we're looking for a motion and any adjustments to this.
Do you have to pass the motion first before you can amend it or not?
You can do it
No,
at the same time.
You can do it at the same time.
Okay. Well, I would make a motion to approve this, but I would like to see on item B that the funds come from budgetary reserve instead of out of the capital project funds. So that's my motion, so then somebody would need to second it, right?
I second.
We have a couple seconds. Was that right?
Oops, wait.
Any questions or concerns?
I have a question on the age, and is this something that could be expected with the age of the elevator, a $26,000 repair?
I can't, Mr. Wall, you might have to help me on this. Was that elevator replaced during the renovation, or is it original? Okay.
With that type of an elevator, that's not common, but it does happen. And the biggest problem with the expense of it is it's a self-contained motor submersible pump. It's all one unit. Once that fails, the whole thing. It's a non-serviceable.
Thank you.
Mr. Wall, I have a follow-up question. Is there a warranty of any kind, given that it's fairly new?
1 year. Yeah, and even Mrs. Petrosky had asked me a couple weeks ago about the original warranty of that elevator. And again, we researched that, it was 1 year. So in these repairs, you're getting a 1 year warranty. When it was originally installed, you had a 1 year warranty. So we're at 2004. So we're well beyond the 1 year warranty.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
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 All those not in favor, nay. Motion carries. Miscellaneous. You have the 22-23 calendar to be approved tonight. The calendar is similar to this year. The first student day is Thursday, August the 25th of 2022. And the last student day is Thursday, June the 1st of 2023. Graduation is June the 10th, 2023. And as we have this year, we do have the 5 flex days built in as our snow days, and those will be used first before we look at any additional days, but there are 2 additional days built in. Disposal of high school resource library books as listed in the attached listing. There were a good number of books there. The basic criteria for this was they were looking at books that were copyrighted before 1985. And then we have 3 policies to do as the first read, which were talked about in the last meeting. Policy 608, bank accounts, 619, district audit, and 622, JSASD statement 34. May I have a motion?
I'll motion.
You need a second?
I'll second.
Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question on the high school library books. Are they looking to be replaced with newer copies?
So one of the things that Mrs. Word, our district librarian, has been doing, you've seen this on a couple agendas from different buildings, is trying to look at circulation reports to see what students aren't using and replace. So there is budget money in the building budgets to replace books, and she's doing both, replacing books so that there's new books in there and getting rid of books that aren't circulating. So she's refreshing all the libraries one at a time. I think last year we approved some of the elementary disposals, and she's now moved on to the high school.
So not necessarily she's replacing copies of the books.
Not necessarily, no.
Okay.
It depends on whether it's just some of these could be a replacement, but some of them could be nobody's reading them, so we're taking them out of the library.
Okay.
It could be both.
Have you actually looked at the list?
Mhm.
Okay. I happen to notice there's quite a few good books, classic books that used to be standard reading. I'm kind of surprised. And some of them were only, some books I saw were uncirculated since, I think it's been like 15 years since they were checked out. But some were recent within the past 5 years. So I was just kind of surprised. Didn't know, I don't know if anybody else has actually taken a look at the books, but you're talking 1,900 books are being disposed of. And so I was just curious to know what exactly the librarian was going to bring in. What kind of, I guess I could ask, classic literature is she planning to replace these books with? That's what I would like to know. And that specific is what kind of literature is she looking to replace these classic books with?
Okay.
Some of them I saw were a lot of reference. I'm sure that's just, between
all
fiction
that
and
online.
nonfiction. Yeah, I mean, I realize there's a lot of that too. I saw a lot of that, but I saw a lot of good literature books.
I can ask that and make sure that you get an answer. But my first answer would be a lot of that is already happening in your English classes, and that's probably some of it too. Like I see them reading those books in English classes, so they're probably not signing them out of the library if they're reading them in English class. So some of those might just be moving out of that circulation because they're being used in an English class. I do see a lot of those classics being read in our English classes.
Okay, well that's refreshing.
Students might not think so, but they are.
I have a follow-up to that. Can you clarify what disposing of them actually means? Are we trashing them? Are we donating them? Are we...
This is the first step. You're taking the first step to remove them. So they can be sold. They can be listed on Municipid to be sold. But if they're not purchased, then they are disposed of.
Is there another option? Like, can we maybe recommend that she maybe look into an inner city library or something that we could possibly pass on these good literature books?
We can try.
I just would hate to see good books literally be trashed.
I'll have that conversation.
Thank you.
Is your mic on? Okay.
So, is there like virtual online books in the library? Are we replacing any of these other books with any of that kind of stuff?
I'm going to look at my principals because I'm pretty sure there are, but I can't say for certain. There you go. So, I mean, some of it is, I was pretty sure we were, but I didn't want to say that we were and we didn't. Some of it is the access is more virtual than coming and signing the book out. So that's some of what you're seeing.
I have a question, excuse me, on policy 622 regarding the GASB statement 34. I can't seem to call that up, the actual.
I noticed myself, I just told
Yeah.
you.
I should know what it is.
Just explain what it
Oh,
is.
that's oh, you want me to tell you statement 3? It was the one that, was passed, I want to say around 04, 05-ish. And when it basically gave your government-wide financial statements to require capitalization and fixed assets and recognition of leases and debt. Basically created the whole entire government-wide financial statements.
So is this a revision of that?
These were
original-
PSBA recommendations.
Oh, okay.
I know when we previously put them on, I think there were very few changes to that.
All right, thanks.
So I don't know what happened, but it actually is attached, the full text of it and the changes were under my report on the January 24th meeting. There is literally one change, and the one change is that in the original edition, the 2010 edition, they didn't spell out what GASB meant. So now in the PSBA update, it actually says Government Accounting Standards Board. Yeah.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Not in favor, nay. Ayes have it. There's nothing under old business, anything that we want to talk about under old business? Hearing none, we'll move on to courtesy of the floor. This public comment is for items that are not on the agenda. If you'd like to make comments, state your name, address, and your topic, and you will have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Board. Bob Pryor, Mifflin Township. Concerning the books, how many on this board, if you don't mind me asking, actually take these new textbooks and review them? I think it's something you should.
I do.
That's good. We got to do that. I know I did when I was on the board. I'd take them home and I'd go through them and I'd look for things that I felt, were not true. Anyway, we got to make sure these books are not printed in a politically correct way. Like, for example, changing the definitions of gender to gender neutral. You know what's going on in the world today. We are born at what we are, and we should not be printing anything to these children concerning that subject. A boy is a boy, a girl is a girl. Very simple. There's only two. Also in history, we got to make sure that there isn't just a progressive view of our history in this country. We have to teach the children the facts of how this country was born and what sacrifices were made by our forefathers. They gave everything up. They were willing to give their life. Most of them gave a lot of what they had and ended up being poor people. But we're a free country because of them. And we can't get away from that fact. And I'd like to know also if I could review some of the books.
We actually have policy on that.
It is? Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pryor. Anyone else? We are going to be going into an executive session, at which time there will be no further motions carried, so I'm asking for an adjournment. So moved. And that ends tonight's meeting.